Welcome. I am Reverend Montclair, and today is not Monday Church with Reverend Montclair, but today is September 11th, 2024, and we have yet another anniversary of a tragic event in the United States of America. So, for the past 23 years, every year we get to remember and grieve and reflect on how much our country, our lives, and our feelings of security have changed within the last 23 years. So, with that comes a lot of grief because, as I've said before, we lost an innocence we didn't even know we had to lose on September 11th, 2001. Anyway, there are so many ways in which we have lost our innocence, all of us, across all nations and all walks of life. Grief is so prevalent in our human societies in modern day that we don't even recognize it because most of us have not learned to process it. We are walking around with unprocessed grief, so much so that our cultures at war with each other are the evidence of this unprocessed grief. We are damage in action. I call it a grief circus, the way that our lives are so impacted, not only on the losses and the events and the tragedies across the globe, but unprocessed ancestral grief that was passed down generation to generation. All of these feelings and emotions and pain that we keep inside, bottled up, it moves through our lives and the lives of others, not because we will it to, but because we will it to be hidden. We will it into submission to pretend it doesn't exist. And in that pretending is the creation of even more damage, even more to grieve about. We walk through our lives as if we are complete and utter hapless victims to the trajectory that our societies have set for ourselves. Instead of choosing not only to feel and therefore heal the pains, the losses, the griefs in our lives, but to choose, really wholeheartedly choose, a better life for ourselves. So, in this age of climate change, in this age of nations still warring nations, of peoples warring different peoples, of individuals warring with themselves, there is so much we need to, I wanted to say, atone for. But it's not that we are ultimately responsible for the losses, but we are responsible for the pretending that those losses don't affect us. And we live in a society in America where our very systems depend on and pretend that we are not human. We are not feeling creatures. Our bank systems profit on those that, because of grief, are not functioning at their highest capacity and therefore may be late on payments, or maybe have overdrawn their accounts. When we are at our weakest, our society is there to punish us, not support us. This kind of culture is repugnant, reprehensible. It does not allow for the frailties of the human animal, the sensitivity of the human animal, the ways in which our culture even endorses such wounds. So, what do we do with all of this grief that we have not been allowed by our culture to embrace, to process, to feel, to heal? We have to go counterculture. We have to radically accept ourselves and our sensitivities and our feelings. We have to own that, yes, we are feeling animals, that we need to feel our feelings, not stuff them, not hide them, not pretend they're not there, but feel them. And feeling them can be messy, it can be scary, it can be lonely, it can be hard. I used to use the analogy that if you have a gunshot wound where the bullet is lodged in your body, but the external wound is healed up, that bullet is still poisoning your system and it needs to come out. And yeah, it's going to hurt like hell to get it out, but it has to go. That's what our stuffed emotions are like. Yeah, you can heal over the glossy surface. You can put a smile on your face and fill up your social calendar. But it doesn't mean that what hurt you isn't still there. And the hurts can be from childhood, from early on in our lives, where our feelings were not validated, where we were not cared for in the right way. And when I say in the right way, loved unconditionally, protected because we're vulnerable, and prioritized where we know we are important, important to our caregivers, important in this world. We are valued, is what we need to learn, that we have value. Our lives are valuable. And if that wasn't taught to us at a young age, we need to somehow teach that to ourselves. We need to go looking for the ways in which we are valid instead of the psychological tendency to find those that were like those of our early years caretakers or not caretakers, to reflect back to us their behavior, which doesn't feel good. It's like we're recreating the wound over and over and over again until we can face it, until we can own it, that yes, it exists, that yes, you feel it. Feel it so that you can heal it, so that you can move on from it. So those are childhood wounds, and there are other wounds, losses of friends, of family, whether through death or through differences of opinion, of choices, of someone getting their feelings hurt, so shutting you out. And there are losses of opportunities, careers, social status. There are losses of mobility sometimes as people age, or losses of cognition. These are all things to grieve. Losses of jobs, losses of careers due to possibly an injury, losses of our image of who we thought we were or wanted to be. There are losses of our beauty, if we had it, or even if we never knew we had it. There are losses when you lose a family member, like a parent that you never had a good relationship with, that when they leave your life for good because they die, that you know, then there's no ever remedying that relationship. It's over. It was all not good. Some people have to live with that and they grieve terribly over people that didn't treat them well when they're gone because there's no repairing it with that person, except perhaps on a spiritual level. So when we have all of these external losses in our lives that reverberate within us like an echo chamber of a canyon, the hollowing out of our heart. When we have those losses and we cannot reach out to others to help heal that, or to the originals that wounded us, we have to find other ways to do it. We have to find ways where we can honor ourselves. We have to find ways where we are radically accepting of our wounds and the necessary ways that we will eventually choose to help heal those wounds. One of those that I endorse is by totally accepting the situation of whatever it was that caused that wound or that deep loss, that grief in you. Accepting it. That doesn't mean endorsing it, but it means accepting that it happened, that this was real, that this was as it was. It could not have been any other way. We fight with reality on such a regular basis, and it wounds us further. Debating back and forth in our minds about how maybe we could have done something different so that maybe we would have been loved or valued more, or maybe that person wouldn't have died if we had done something differently. In life, every moment, we only get one chance. And in those moments, we do the best we knew to do in that moment. Might not have been good, might not have been bad, but it was singularly that moment, and that moment is past. So, ways to make amends when you do not have the others that are lost to your lives, in your lives, are to accept that it happened, accept yourself and how you feel, and do the inner work. And the inner work is about digging into that heart and resurfacing that wound so that it can be healed. And that may take many different forms. Often, creativity is a great catalyst for healing when people have experienced great wounds. So, when I say creativity, there are many different ways that one can approach externalizing the pain that we hold within. And there are some very uncreative, yet not uncommon ways that people do it, but it doesn't help them heal. It just passes more damage on and on and on and on and on to others in our world. And somehow, the psyche, the unconscious, thinks that that we are mastering or have mastery over the wound when we pass it on to others, but it doesn't go away that way. It's still there. We just share the misery. You've heard the phrase, misery loves company. Wow. So does love. So does healing. And that's the kind of community we need to choose. Rather than trying to spread our misery around, stop the the unconscious direction of damage and choose to heal from the inside out. So that's where we are in our world. We have a choice. And today being, again, September 11th, we can reflect on grief of all kinds and throughout the world because we are all connected. So to be creative about our healing often is about sharing not only our story, but by creating symbolic representations for the pains that we have under the surface. And as I mentioned, the arts, some people can write their emotions into a song, into poems, into stories, not revenge stories, but stories that help the human animal connect with itself and with others. Share stories of experience, stories of loss, stories of redemption of lives that were forever altered by an experience, but somehow managed to rise above the pain and the loss. There's a person whose name I do not have on hand right now that started a program called the um, Combat Paper Project. And this person who began this program would work with veterans of war by helping them turn their wartime uniforms into paper pulp, and then turning that paper pulp into art, into paper to make art from. So instead of a reminder of the PTSD, the trauma hanging in the closet, something inside of these soldiers was transformed through the use of the creative process. From that pulverizing of the uniform and the societal structure that said it was okay for these young men to sacrifice their lives for prosperity, for the powerful in the offices in Washington, for a cause that may not be a valid or noble cause. There is so much trauma upon trauma visited to our veterans, so much injustice, which when they do get to come home, they find that they can never go home again because they're changed. Irreparably changed. So when we find in our lives something has irreparably changed us, the focus cannot be on repair, but on transmutation, on completely reinventing ourselves and our self-image to incorporate the knowledge, the experience, The profound revelations that come through tragedies, through loss, through a loss of innocence that we didn't even know we had to lose. So when personal losses, like the loss of a parent that was loved, even the loss of a pet that was loved, the loss of a friend, a family member, a limb, an ability of understanding the world as it changes so quickly. When we experience these losses, the worst thing we can do is ignore them. The worst thing we can do for ourselves is to pretend that they don't exist. The worst thing we can do for ourselves is to judge ourselves for having feelings. We all have feelings. And the only place in our society where denial of feelings, of sensitivities, is, I want to say profitable, but I will say encouraged, is for the profit of what is called the industrial war complex. Because soldiers that have compassion for others don't make good soldiers, do they? Because soldiers that have feelings don't follow directions very well. Because soldiers that refuse to obey because of their morals are not very good soldiers. So there are so many ways in which that connection to our feelings is broken down in the training, in the training and making of a soldier, where prejudice is encouraged, where inhumane behavior is encouraged, where complete and utter obedience is required. And if you don't do it, you are hazed and rejected or killed. And they'll pretend it's an accident. So, what do we do with our society to reintegrate the feeling human? One is to honor our own individual selves, our own individual feelings, and to reject the cultural norms. And I say norms because, like advertising in our movies, where masculine men are not supposed to have feelings, where adult persons of either sex are supposedly not to be able to cry, not allowed to cry. So here we are with this grief stuffing culture. And here we are with mixed emotions about our emotions and mixed feelings about others with emotions that freely show them. One thing we need to do is breathe into it and allow ourselves to be different, other than what we were taught, to be humans, to be frail at times. And sometimes, yeah, we have to be strong to muscle on through the most abhorrent conditions, like in times of war. You know, you've heard the phrase chin up, right? Keep focused on that goal. Stiff upper lip. And then we may find when we've been doing that for a while that when someone shows us compassion is when we lose it all. All the emotions come flooding out because we've had to be so strong for so long. And finally, in the presence of compassion, we're a mess. And that mess is scary to people that have always held in their emotions and prided themselves on their strength to be stoic, to be unfeeling, to be in control, to be in charge. We are not, any of us, ever in control all the time. And even the strongest amongst us have these vulnerabilities and feelings that can be all encompassing for a time. But the strongest amongst us allow those feelings to flow. And it is in the allowing your feelings to flow, in the allowing of your ability to feel those feelings, that you allow healing to happen. That your healing comes faster than if you deny the wound, than if you stuff the feelings, than if you judge yourself for being sensitive. It is only those without compassion that are the monsters in our society. If we lose our compassion for others, for ourselves, we are the monsters. So it's not just us responding to monstrous treatment, but we actually become that which wounds, that which harms, that which is insensitive, inhuman. And there you have the perfect corporate puppet, the perfect war participant. Oh, God forbid we choose peace. God forbid we choose compassion, acceptance, tolerance. That kind of God is not God. That kind of God was made up by generations upon generations upon generations and generations of men that lost their fathers to war, and they grew up without their fathers. They grew up, if they had them, with fathers that were shut down emotionally because of the trauma they experienced in war. Because of the post-traumatic stress disorders of trauma, whether it be from war or child abuse or alcoholic child abuse, whether it be from poverty-stricken families that were so hard-pressed to squeak out an existence that they didn't have the energy or the time or even the caring for their children, because it was even impossible for them to take care of themselves. It's a famous photograph of a woman selling her children during the Great, or I will say not so great, Depression. She's embarrassed. The kinds of wounds that people bury are always apparent in their behavior. We have one of our presidential candidates ex-President Donald Trump, whose childhood wounds are so apparent, his neglectful childhood has him seeking the attention of all the world. He needs it. He desires it. He's angry and wants to point the finger at others, to blame them for something, to incite riots, quite literally, so he can feel powerful, so he can feel in control. And it's those that are always trying to be in control of others that are most out of control within themselves. We have Putin over in Russia, who also had a troubled childhood. Putin's mother had to give him up for adoption after she had remarried because the father of her child, Putin, disappeared on her. And when she remarried, Putin's stepdad, he did not own him or love him or accept him or speak to him. So he is always out there trying to control, to make himself more important, to gain more property, to boost up some kind of legacy that he wanted to leave behind. A man with a Napoleonic complex, Putin, Trump with a Hitler complex, pointing the finger at others and blaming other races. These are broken children in adult form. There are so many of them in our society, and many of them rose to the top of corporations. Our corporate policies are anti-human policies, where you try to get the most out of each individual and see them as disposable, like our soldiers. And every young man, when they hear that they have to register for the draft at a certain age of maturation, know that our society sees them as disposable. Let that filter into your consciousness and know that your society does not really value your life. They may value your efforts for a short time on the front lines, but they don't value all of the beauty and soulfulness and insights and sensitivity of your nature. That uniqueness that you were born with. So, attacks on prominent places, in different places of nations, often elicit retaliatory responses. George W. Bush, his retaliation was not specifically justified or justifiable. And it had a massive negative impact on the societies that we went to war with at that time. Putin, just like our government during that time, also manufactured reasons and lies to justify going to war with Ukraine. Lies, hidden agendas, inhuman actions, using people to increase one's own power. These are deplorable, and these are direct evidence of unprocessed grief, of wounded children. It is in our best interests to really search within ourselves for those wounds, those childhood wounds that we all carry. Some of us, the wounds are lighter than others, not as deep. Some of us have found ways to process the grief, and some of us haven't. Some of us are still stuck in the stereotypes of how we're supposed to behave, even though the supposed tos have nothing to do with human nature or human nurture. Built into our systems, our wounding, and with foresight, we can build into our systems healing, build into our systems the prevention of wounding, build into our systems support, encouragement, enough sustenance for all. It's when we choose to have human values instead of greedy values, when we get to share in the upliftment of all, rather than trying to uplift ourselves by putting someone else down. That's not real power. That is dependent power. That is external power, but is not internal power. True power shares. True power is not hierarchical. True power emanates from within, not from outside. So empower yourself. Own your grief. Heal your grief. Find ways to move your body so it moves through you, because wounds get grounded at different places in our body, where trauma has happened to us, where the body learns to cower and turn within. When we change our posture to stand with shoulders back, head held high, when we allow ourselves to be proud of ourselves despite our vulnerabilities, because of how much we have endured, not despite it, because of it. And then when we have learned to deal with our pains, our wounds, our losses, share with others how we did it, so they too can heal and acknowledge their humanness and have permission to be sensitive, have permission to be humane, have permission to be kind to the other, to be kind to our imperfect selves, in our imperfect world, on this fragile and beautiful planet. So let's choose to heal fully from the inside out. And when we make that choice, the reverberation throughout the world will be felt, will be evident. When we turn away from the endorsement of trauma upon trauma upon trauma. Shine light on those wounds. Tell your story to as many people as it takes. Join support groups if you need it. And most of us do, especially in our society that tends to isolation, tends to individual, suck it up and be a man, woman, powerful, all by yourself. But that's not really who we are. No one is a self made man or woman. Everyone has had some kind of support behind them, some kind of encouragement. Think about who it has been in your life that has helped you, and then look for more. Look for more of that kind of support that you need. Create the support that you need. Use your words to help you encourage yourself, to be gentle with yourself, to help you heal yourself. And I'm not talking here about saying things like you're the best overall, but allow yourself to be the best you. You don't have to be better than anybody else. Just be the best you can be. And to be the best you can be is to be the most healed version of yourself in this world, is to be the most secure inside of yourself, which doesn't come from the outside. It comes from that radical self-acceptance. And when we have that radical self-acceptance and radical gentleness with our own vulnerabilities, what happens is we become more radically accepting of others and more radically compassionate of others' vulnerabilities. And we start to see that the bravado and the tough guy attitude and all of those supposedly real man characteristics are really just big children trying to be strong because they're so damn wounded. They're trying to be tough to cover up some really deep wounds, deep grief that they've never been able to process. So accept yourself. Accept your wounds. Be gentle with them. Try to externalize them through creative means. Dance. Get it out of your body. Move your body. Move your thoughts. Move your location. Get a different perspective. Put the pain outside of yourself. Give it a name, a color, a chapter that closes. Give it a time expiration. And that doesn't mean saying, oh, it's been a year, I'm going to be over this experience of grief for someone that I loved and lost. It's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is understand that a new chapter of yourself is possible and probable when you own all of your feelings and are able to accept yourself on such a deep level and accept that whatever experiences that brought you pain happened, could not have been any other way. They happened. Yeah, if somebody chose better, if somebody knew better, if someone wasn't trying to externalize their pain onto you or blame you or be jealous of you or whatever it is. But that's not the way it was. We have to accept the way it was so that we can heal what is and move beyond it. When I hear people saying it shouldn't have been that way, but it was that way. It shouldn't have happened, but it did happen. There is no should. There's only what is, what was, and what was is past. And that doesn't mean it's not still part of you. But what do you do with it? Pretend it's not there? No. You got to excavate it. Even when you thought you had it all together, if you're reactive, if you have those buttons that some people seem to push, it's a pretty sure sign that there's something there that needs to be excavated. What's the other word for driving out the demons? So our wounds that we've disowned are kind of like demons living within us. And if it scares you to see what kind of sounds you can make when you're in touch with those wounded places of yourself, it's okay. Let it scare you. If you are turned off by the kind of gruesome artwork you might make when you're in touch with that wounded part, it's okay. Let it turn you off. If you don't like the way your body moves when you're trying to shake it off, it's all right. Some things are necessary. It's like when you have to eat only vegetables to heal your body. You might not like vegetables, or maybe you'll find ways to prepare them that are palatable. And we have to find ways to prepare our mind to accept the process of healing. And that means time set aside. That means introspection, not distraction. That means possibly asking for help, seeking out help, maybe in books, in people that have been through tough experiences. That means a willingness to do the work. And sometimes a willingness to do the work is simply speaking the truth. When someone says, "How are you?" and you just say, "I'm not okay. I'm not okay because this happened. I'm not okay because this scared me." And what I found when I was going through grieving my parents, or even the anticipation of losing my parents, and I had those conversations with complete strangers, it opened up a connection where they shared about their losses. It opened up a heartfelt communication where we could understand each other. So when you lose something precious to you, or even when you think you've lost it, but maybe you haven't, be honest with yourself about that which means something to you. And then do your best to remedy that situation. And here I am not talking about revenge, I'm talking about healing. So, on this day, an anniversary of a tragedy in our culture, I wish you healing. I wish you compassion. I wish you companionship and community and heartfelt conversation. May you walk in beauty, with beauty before you, like an expectation of beauty to come. With beauty behind you, may you reflect on your past and find the beautiful there. With beauty above you, may your idea of the divine, of God, of the universe be one that embraces all of you respects all of you, that sees you as you are and declares you good, necessary, valuable, precious. May you walk with beauty below your feet. May you know the connection, the deep felt connection that you, as a creature of this earth, have with the earth.